Okay, so I was talking about the title of this project, this new project we're opening, and I will call it UKZN NVIVO training. And if you want to describe the project, you can do the description here. This is an NVIVO training for UKZN staff and students. You don't have to if you don't need to. And then you have this function here, which I always advise people or encourage people to tick. What this does is that once you tick this option, it keeps a log of every action that you take in this project. So for example, when you load the program, if you create a new node, a log is created that on so date at so time you created a new node. If you remove that node or merge it with another node, it keeps a record of that. You bring in a new document, it logs that in, so that at a later stage, if you want to track the changes that you've made to this program, you are able to use the project event log, and you're able to track the changes that you have made to this project. So it's like an event history, let me put it that way, of whatever you do on this project. So for those of you, if you are able to follow, you have to click on this link. And then you have this option here to choose where you want to store your file. If you want to store your file on a USB or on a particular folder, for those of you who are doing your PhD or your master's, I believe you have a folder that is specifically for your thesis. So you would want to browse and go to that particular folder and save this file. So for me, this training is on my desktop. It's in the folder called training, and I'm going to save the file in that training. In that folder, I click on OK. And then it opens this window. And you can see that it has a different menu options here. And we're going to go through each of these options. We're going to ignore this at the moment because we're not going through this. It's a quick start steps. So I'm going to close that. And we have these windows where we work with our NVIVO. As I was telling you at the beginning, you have these options here. In the older version here, you have sources, but now it's been changed to files, to data. And under files, you have, under data, you have your files. This folder, it's simply where you store all the information, all the data that you're going to be working with in NVIVO. So your Word document, for example, your videos, your pictures, you're able to bring all of them into this particular folder and store them here. Here you have your file classifications, and here is where you are able to store your bibliographic information. For example, if you're using NVIVO for literature review. In external, what this does is sometimes you have some kind of data that you are not able to bring into NVIVO. So if you have like a textbook that you cannot bring into NVIVO, you store information about that particular textbook in NVIVO here, and you're able to take notes. Or if you have a file that is sitting on your computer, for those who do, for example, research that involves a lot of videos, and you don't want to bring them into NVIVO because you don't want those files to slow down the functioning of the software. You leave them sitting somewhere on your computer, and you're able to create a link using this external folder to where they are sitting in NVIVO. But for the purpose of this training, we'll just be working with files only. We're going to skip to nodes. Nodes, as we've said, is simply the folder where you store related ideas or related things about your data. Relationship are relationship types. They relate to, they're talking about the different kinds of nodes and how they are connected. Under cases, as I've said, is where you store information about your unit of analysis. If you've done interviews, your unit of analysis will be your individual transcripts. Here is where you take your notes, and at a later stage, I'm going to show you how to use maps, different kinds of maps to display graphical information about your data. If you come up here, you can see that we have buttons that are similar to what you have in your Word. You have your save, you have your edit option, you have your undo. And then when you come to your file, under file option here, you can open a new project. You can copy your project, you can close your project. And here, project event log. If you remember when we're opening this blank project, I asked you to click that option. So at a later stage, after we've carried out some activities on this particular project, we'll be able to come back here to see how NVIVO is keeping track of the changes that we've made. And next to home, you have your import. If you click on that option, on import option, it opens this window for you. And as you can see, there are tons of data format that you can you can work with, bring it to NVIVO. So if you have an existing project, for example, that you have on a USB, you're sitting on a new computer, you click on project, you're able to navigate into where that project is stored and you open it. If you bring in a web page that you've captured, you use nCapture. If you bring in documents, for example, your PDF, or your Word document, you click on this. If you bring in Excel, you use this option. For people who work with text files, for example, those who work with Notepad, you can use that. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but this shows you how the range of different, the range of file formats that NVIVO is able to handle. If we come to our create, the different things that we can create with in NVIVO. For the purpose of this training, we're going to be focusing on nodes. I've explained what nodes is. We're going to be focusing on cases and then on case classification. And here is the NVIVO transcript that I mentioned to you at the beginning of this training. If I click on this option, it will ask me to log in because I've never used this option before. Anybody who wants to use this, you click on this and then it takes you to the different steps to create an account, and then you're able to upload your file and they will have it transcribed for you and you can access it. But remember, it's a paid service, it's not a free service. Here under Explore, this gives us a number of options to go through our data. You can do a query wizard, you can do a text search, you can do word frequency. We're going to be going through these options at a later stage. You're able to also create different kinds of charts in NVIVO. So I'm going to pause for about 4 or 5 minutes in case there are questions, because I'm sharing the chat. So if there are questions, please, I would like to attend to them at this stage, and then we can continue.
Andrew, the only query that we seem to have here, or are you able to check it there, is about people getting some error about link provided is not working, 403 forbidden. So I'm not sure whether that's an error related to NVIVO.
I think this is about people wanting to install NVIVO.
I have no idea. Okay, so Smart says it's working fine.
Okay.
All right. Prof Bob wants to speak. Prof Bob, you should be able to unmute your mic.
Now I can. Thank you. Just to perhaps advise students, especially those of you who are doing PhDs, what you must have on hand. If you don't have it for this session, please try and prepare it for the next sessions. Is to have some of your own files to work with. So we are giving you some documents for the training, but you can work with your own files as well.
All right. All right.
Okay, thanks, Prof. Okay, so I can continue.
Yes.
I don't see any question.
3:23 now, so you can see how much more you want to cover for the rest of the session.
All right. So when we come to this option, we just have to quickly go through how do we bring in files. I like shortcuts, so I'm going to be showing you the shortcuts instead of coming here and create, come in here and importing files. I'm just going to be working on this. I'm going to be working just here. So for some of you who are collecting data from different sources or different kinds of data, some of you will be doing individual interviews, focus group discussions. Maybe you're doing a document analysis for argument's sake. It is advised folders for the different kinds of data that you'll be working with. Why is that? At a later stage, when you are exploring your data, you might want to limit your text search to a particular kind of data. So I'm doing a study about smoking behavior. I want to look at how cost, for example, contributes to smoking cessation. And I want to perform that search on individual interviews. If you create folders here and you put individual interviews in that folder, you can limit your search to this particular folder. If you create a folder for focus groups, you are able to limit your search at a later stage to the folder that you want to search in. So to create a new folder, all you need to do is right-click on that, on File, and then you come to this option that says New, okay? And you give it a name. So I'm going to follow the example that I've used. I'll call this individual interviews. And if you want to describe, you can also describe it here. I'm not going to do that, so I'll click on OK. You see now that the individual interview now appears as a sub of files. I'm going to come back here again. I'll right-click on that. Assuming for this study, I also did the focus group discussions, and I want to create a folder for those files. I'll right-click on that. Take the step again. Remember, you have to go back to File. If I do that here, individual interviews, the focus group folder will become a subfolder of individual interviews. So I have to go back to Files and right-click. I click on New Folder, and I call it Focus Groups. I click on OK. If I'm also collecting documents that I'm working on this in this study, I come back here again, I right-click, I say New Folder, and then I say Documents. Then I click on OK. So now we have our three folders that is going to contain the different kinds of files that we'll be using for the purpose of this study. So how do you bring in your data? To do that, you need to go to the individual folder that you want. So I want to bring individual interviews. So I'll click on individual interviews. I'm not changing the name. I click on that, is selected, and I can click on any space here. And I say import, because I want to import files. If it's a survey, you can go to survey and it gives you the different kinds of survey format. If you want to import from a particular kind of program, you go there. But here I want to import Word documents. So I click on that option. And then I have to navigate to where my data is stored. My data is stored in my desktop in a folder called training. I open that folder, and these are the 4 folders that I want to bring in. At this stage, let me pause to emphasize that if you've done individual interview, represents your unit of analysis. What do I mean? Each file should be one interview. You go out and interview one person, you transcribe it. You interview a second person, you save it as a file. Why do we want to do that? We need to do that because at a later stage, when you're going through your data, when you're doing your analysis, attribution becomes an important thing. You don't want to only know what people are saying. You want to know who is saying that, because the position of the person in relation to your object of study is very important. So you need to give your data a name that you'll be able to use to attribute. At this stage, if you want to anonymize, you can also anonymize and give it acronym if that's what you want to do. But remember, you need to have a separate document that tells you what this anonymous name stands for, and give it a name that is meaningful. So I'll give you an example. I have a very long name here, which is something you shouldn't do. This first 2 should be good enough. It tells me that this one is a State of the Nation address in 2018 by Cyril Ramaphosa. The second one is by Jacob Zuma in 2017, but these other ones are quite long and they don't even tell you which year. So you need to be very careful when it comes to naming your file. So now I have these 4 files that we are going to be working with. So let's assume that these are individual interviews that we've conducted, and we have the transcript here. So to bring all of them in, I don't want to do import 4 times. I'm just going to click on the first one. I hold the Shift key on my computer. I click on the last, and all of them are highlighted. Once that is done, I click on Open, and then I'm given this option. It says create cases for each imported file. So this is a very nice functionality that has been added to NVIVO 12. If you click on this option, you are able to create cases. Remember, I told you cases is simply the container where you're able to record demographic information about your participants. So if you click on this option, it asks you what name, what do you want to call it? So I'm going to call this demographics, okay? And this already tells me that I'm creating a case for each of the files that I'm importing, and the cases will be stored in a folder called cases. So that will be the cases here. So all the cases will be stored here. And all I need to do now is simply click on import. And it takes a while. And now we have our 4 files. They've been brought into our NVIVO. You look at this place, it tells us that it's been coded one time, or the 4 files. Why is that? it takes the cases that we've created, and I'm going to open that just now, as a code that we've coded each of these. The references refers to the number of times. This refers to the number of folders where you've coded into. This refers to the number of times. These numbers will change. We're going to be seeing that. It gives you the date and the time that these files were modified. And if you're working in a project, for example, you would want to know who is making modification to your file. So here it gives an acronym of my name, Andrew Emmanuel. So you're able to see who made changes to this file on what date. So if we come, so this has created cases for each of the files. And at a later stage, we're going to create a classification sheet that will link to these cases. So when I come back to my individual interviews, all you need to do to open each of these is to double click, and it opens the file for you. And you are able to go through your files. So I'm going to go through that process again, and then we can end our training for today if there are no questions. Your file into NVIVO. I'm going to delete this and take the process all over again. So you come to the folder where you want to bring your data into. You come to this blank place and you right click. You go to import items because we were importing files. Click on that and then you navigate to where your files are stored. If they are stored in a folder called my master's thesis or my PhD thesis, you need to navigate to that. So I have my 4 files here that I want to bring in. I click on the first one because I want to import all of them at a go. I hold my shift key and I click on the last one. I click on this option. It says open. It is now asking me to do the same thing to create new cases. I've already done that, so I'm going to uncheck that. I don't want to create 2 cases. But if it's the first time that you're creating, you're importing this data, you need to check that option and give it a name. So I'm going to uncheck that option and I say import. And then we have our 4 files here. So I'm going to pause here and take any questions that you have. If there are no questions, then we can end our training for today and pick up where we stop from tomorrow.
Thank you, Dr. Andrew, for that presentation. Prof. Bob, is there anything that you would like to say?
I'd just like to reinforce that perhaps the most important part of using NVIVO effectively is the way in which you name your files and the way and the decisions you make about how they should exist in their own entities. Because it really, really helps. As you go along, you realize that one of the values of NVIVO is that it links a particular extract, a particular phrase, a particular part of an image. It links it to the source. So when you are writing, for example, you are expected to know, if you did 5 key informant interviews and your methodological approach was that you wanted to hear different voices or perspectives to understand student protests at university. So you interviewed somebody from the SRC, you've interviewed somebody, an academic, you've interviewed somebody from the executive leadership, you've interviewed a first-year student, and you interviewed a final year student or a postgraduate student. It is so important when you're looking at a phrase to know who said it or in what context it was said. So my suggestion to all of you in preparation for tomorrow is to go and have, even if you haven't started doing your research as yet. And by the way, learning the tools, it is better for you to learn it before you go collect data, etc. Because then you know the tools you have at hand that's going to assist you, and it also helps you what data to collect and how to collect the data. So think about each of your objectives, especially those of you who are relying almost exclusively on qualitative approaches. Think about each of your objectives and what's the source that's going to help you to achieve the objectives or answer your research question. And then that particular source, how is it you can capture it in terms of one either document, or I'm a geographer, an environmental scientist, colleagues, that's my background. So we depend a lot on visual data, images. If we want to understand pollution, we don't only do interviews, we would go and take pictures, or we would take, do water testing or whatever it is. So all of these different sources you can bring into NVIVO, but you need to keep it in as discrete as possible units, which I think is what Dr. Oakham, Andrew, has been emphasizing. It may not be apparent to you as yet why we're so obsessed with these things, but it will definitely become apparent by Friday when you see how then it helps you to analyze your data and to be able to keep the voices intact and the context intact, because that's the value of qualitative research. Quantitative research, you generalize. Qualitative research, you drill down and you do deep dives into who's saying what and what then is the implication or the meaning of that particular response.
Okay, thanks, Prof. Do we have any questions?
There's no questions on the chat, Dr. Andrew.
Yeah. So your homework for tomorrow, colleagues, try and sort out your data, think about it, think about how many interviews, how many this, where you're getting. And by the way, a lot of the information will also be documentary sources. You may come across articles where it actually talks to your topic. So for example, if you're looking at gender-based violence in universities and you saw a data and your case study is UKZN and you saw a similar study that was done at UCT, for a qualitative research, I would bring that into my NVIVO, because it will allow me then to be able to say the sentiments expressed by the first-year female students interviewed resonates with those found at UCT. Specifically, though one of the students in this study stated, which is similar to the student interviewed in this study. So you see how it begins to talk to each another. And that's what NVIVO helps you to do, is to take a theme and it will help you bring all the information you have about that theme into almost one document, which now you can see and start making the links and connections. And that helps particularly for the students who are doing PhD. Remember, you cannot get caught up in only describing results. You have to interpret results of a very high academic level. So it moves the analysis from description, so-and-so said this, this key informant said that key informant said this, to a higher level interpretation and analysis, which then becomes the basis for contribution to knowledge.
Prof. Bob?
I'll stop there because I love talking myself, which is not necessarily a good thing.
No, Prof. Bob, there's a question here by Ozioma. Would you like to answer it, or should I address it to Dr. Oakham?
I didn't see it. Sorry, I was so busy talking.
It says, just to reconfirm, did you say that interview response data should be stored as individual files in the interview folder in NVIVO?
Yes.
All right, Azima, you got your response? It's yes.
You see, but it is still individual files. It is still discrete units. We can revisit that tomorrow in terms of how you can start to manage your files. It would be like a Word document, colleagues. Remember, you can create a folder called my doctoral studies. And in that folder, you can have your 5 chapters. In each of the chapters, you can have, this is my survey. So you could keep linking files to it. But it needs to be discrete. That's the principle of optimally using NVIVO, meaning it must stand alone.
Dr. Okum, you wanted to add something?
Thanks, Prof. So a simple answer is if you've done 10 interviews, you should have 10 files, and each of them with a unique name. If you've done 20 interviews, 10 files. If you've done 10 focus group discussions, 10 files. Because as Prof said, if you mix them up, if you've done 10 interviews and you put all of them into one file, NVIVO will take that as a single unit of analysis. And it becomes very difficult at a later stage to know who says what. That's why it's very important. So simply let each file represent a unit of analysis.
We can start with just re-looking at that tomorrow, Andrew.
Okay, thanks. So what I would say is please, between today and tomorrow, just practice the simple thing that we've done today, creating a new project and importing your file into end where we stopped today.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Andrew. Thank you, Prof. Bob. Can we now close the session for today?
Yes. Thank you all, and hopefully everybody will be back tomorrow.
Yes, so tomorrow we'll be working with notes, creating cases, creating nodes, and then creating a node hierarchy. So those are the things that we'll be dealing with in our session tomorrow.
Thank you, everybody, for attending. Have a good evening, and we'll see you at 2 o'clock tomorrow.
Thank you, Upsana. You take care. Bye.